to address concerns raised by manufacturers and other stakeholders regarding recent tax changes, President Bola Tinubu of Nigeria has signed 4 executive orders, including a Finance Act Order 2023, which defers the commencement dates of the changes contained in the Act for May 2023, and 3 others. Here is Dele Alake making that announcement right now.
In his inaugural speech, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu promised to address business unfriendly fiscal policy measures and multiplicity of taxes. Consequently, President Bola Tinubu, in fidelity to the pledge to put Nigerians at the center of government policies, has signed the following executive orders. Executive Order 1, the Finance Act Effective Date Variation Order 2023 has now deferred the commencement date of the changes contained in the Act from May 28, 2023 to September 1, 2023. This is to ensure adherence to the 90 days minimum advance notice for tax changes as contained in the 2017 National Tax Policy. Executive Order 2, the Customs Excise Tariff Variation Amendment Order 2023. This has also shifted the commencement date of the tax changes from March 27, 2023 to August 1, 2023, and also in line with the National Tax Policy. Order 3, the President has given an order suspending the 5% tax on telecommunication services as well as the excise duties escalation on locally manufactured goods. 4, further to his commitment to creating a business-friendly environment, the President has ordered the suspension of the newly introduced green tax by way of excise tax on single-use plastics, including plastic containers and bottles. In addition, the President has ordered the suspension of import tax adjustment levy on certain categories of vehicles. Like I said earlier on, any vehicle of 2,000 capacity, engine capacity and above, which the tax was imposed upon, has now been suspended. So it means that for the meantime, in the interim, the tax imposed on any vehicle of 2,000 cc and above is now suspended.
Our aim is not to tax production. Our aim is to increase our productive activity, capacity to produce. Then we can tax our consumption. And that is the direction of our economic planning. And then we want to increase the trust that we have in government. And if you observe what has happened in the last few days, the last few months that we've been here, we've kept to our word. Part of what we are doing today, just to increase this trust that we are here to do what is the best for the country.
All right, joining us for a reaction, Taiwo Oyedele. He's a partner, fiscal policy and Africa tax leader at PwC. Good afternoon to you, Taiwo. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss this. So I want to get your reaction. I mean, a lot of, actually, even on social media, getting a lot of questions about whether or not this change in the dates has any impact on the businesses whose burden the president wants to alleviate.
Yes, Rotus, thank you very much for inviting me. I think I'm actually very glad and excited because, for those who have been following these developments in the media space, you would have noticed the manufacturers in particular feeling so frustrated and almost helpless that they were dealing with a lot of challenges, economic headwinds, naira scarcity reduced their turnover in double digits. They were closing down, plants, and then voila, government added more to it and say increase, because they were already paying high excise duties already. It says, pay more excise duty at that very particular time. And the way it was done, it was such that the commencement date even predated the publication of the order in the official gazette. Not the way to make tax laws or any policy for that matter. So what the president has done now, first, is to defer the commencement date, so it gives enough notice for people to even prepare their affairs. Some of them need to change their ERP for accounting system. You need time to do all of that. And that's why the National Tax Policy says if you introduce any changes, give at least 90 days notice. So Mr. President now is trying to do that. And number two is that some of the changes are not even necessary, or they are coming at the wrong time. So those are being suspended indefinitely for further deliberation and review. So
Now,
I feel this is good.
okay, so but I mean, okay, which is good. Now you're not a lawyer, obviously, so if you don't want to speculate on this, perhaps you don't have to. But there's been, I guess, some questions as to whether or not this executive order can supersede what was expected to be what's expected to be law with respect to some of these taxes.
Yeah, so I'm not a lawyer, but this I can tell you 100%. I know exactly what people are talking about. So normally, the president, by an order, should not be able to amend a law enacted by the National Assembly. That is correct. But this is different. It's different because if you look at the Finance Act 2023, which is one of the orders that the president is deferring the commencement date, that same Finance Act has a provision that says the commencement date of this Finance Act shall be the date it's signed into law or any other date as may be prescribed by the president by an order. So the National Assembly have delegated that power to the president to determine the commencement date. So the president is only just exercising the legal powers that have been conferred on him. So I think this is 100% in order, if you ask me.
All right. So what about the burden on businesses? Now they've got more time, as you've said. I think ERP, if you want to help me out, is that enterprise resource planning as far as preparing for the shift?
Yeah, no, this is more around the planning and reporting system. So if you have any ERP system that you use for your accounting, you must have already incorporated into it what rate of taxes you pay and those customers you pay to, which authorities you remit to. All those details are not something you tweak overnight and you begin to report differently the following day. So what the previous government was doing is sometimes they even sign the laws and they tend to keep it to themselves, and it would have commenced without anybody being aware of it. Like in the Finance Act 2023, there's one of the provisions says you have to pay 0.5% on importation from outside of Africa. And it took effect from 28th of May, but nobody knew that the law was even signed. We only realized that around June, and many people were already in default of a law they had no idea existed. So this commencement date being pushed forward just shows orderliness, and we expect that this will be sustained going forward so that people can have some sanity and reasonable expectation that things will be done in line with due process going forward. We see in many countries around the world where you even get a year or two advance notice for changes to the tax system. I'm sure we can manage to start with even 90 days.
Okay, for sure. So and funny enough, interesting enough, when we had you about a couple months ago with our correspondent Abi Owolawi on this show, you did emphasize that communication, forward guidance, and so on is very important so that businesses can plan accordingly. So the president has done that. But I mean, there are still taxes that are going to be coming later on. Well, can you speak to, I guess, the revenue needs of the government and what this means for businesses who eventually have to pay it, even with the advance notice to prepare?
Yeah, you're right. I think at the end of the day, debt and taxes are the only thing that they say are certain in life. So we have to pay taxes. Individuals have to pay, household, businesses have to pay. But what we're actually saying is the way and manner that those taxes are designed and at the point at which they are being asked to be paid has to be such that does not come in the way of business and economic growth, right? So, and the analogy I always make is the difference between whether you're taxing seed or whether you're taxing fruit. And you heard the special advisor to the president, in your introductory video saying that we don't want to tax production, we want to tax consumption. So that's a good principle. Allow investment to thrive. And when they start producing results, you can tax their returns, and that's okay. So we know that people will have to pay. Some of the taxes have been suspended indefinitely, like the single-use plastic tax. We know that we want to be good to the environment, we want to do CO2 net zero, but you won't get there overnight, right? So what are the alternatives you have? If you impose tax now on single-use plastic, what you do eventually is just increase the price of goods. And that fuels further inflation in a situation where, purchasing power is low, many people are poor, and they're just struggling to survive. So we have to do these things in a way that we not come in the way of creating prosperity for our people. You don't want to have, an environment that is clean and safe with people who are miserable. Why can't you find a balance where you still take care of your people and also look after the environment?
Speaking of the environment, I really want to get your thoughts on this. Nigeria is, of course, a fossil fuel dependent nation. Still, of course, disproportionate dependence compared to other revenue channels on oil revenues. Do you think that there is an avenue for tax revenue in the future for the whole renewable drive? So maybe this single-use plastics is suspended now, but considering where the world is going, you see the carbon tax credits in other parts of the world. Is there a channel here in the future at some point for taxes on the renewable path for this energy transition for Nigeria? Or is that too far in the future?
Excellent question, my brother. So it's important. We have to always remind ourselves that we only have one planet. We don't have any other one. And we have to live in a way that we don't compromise the future of the next generation. So that's taken for granted. That is cast in stone. The question is usually about the approach. How do you go about it as a country? Now, Nigeria's commitment is net zero CO2 by 2060. We're in 2023. And as of today, if you look at the CO2 emission per capita, Nigeria is one of the lowest in the world. It's about 4 times lower than the global average. So to be honest, we're not the problem of the world when it comes to CO2 emission. And therefore, when we are thinking about our fossil fuel, because we are blessed with a lot of it, we have crude oil, we have gas. Gas is fossil, but it's still cleaner than petrol and diesel. By 2050, if you look at all the projections that have been made by leaders in that space of petroleum and energy, it shows that by 2050, the world will be consuming more fossil fuel than we are consuming today. Just that the composition of fossil fuel out of the energy mix will be lower as a percentage. Why? Because the total consumption of energy would have grown significantly, but the percentage of fossil fuel will be lower, but in absolute terms, will be more than today. What does that mean? It means that countries like Nigeria must continue to invest in fossil fuel while using something like gas, which is what Nigeria has planned to do, as the transition energy because it's cleaner. This is not for you to stop producing crude oil. You should continue to produce it and do that responsibly so you can generate revenue from fossil fuel and use that to diversify the economy. Look at, Dangote refinery, for example. A lot of value will come from that. My understanding from, the industry experts is that 1 barrel of crude oil that is around $70 to $80, when you finish processing it, it's worth $2,000. So just imagine what that value will mean for Nigeria. So Nigeria has to be sensible. Nigeria has to be logical. Nigeria has to be reasonable in our national approach to this CO2 conversation and our fossil fuel that God has blessed us with.
Thanks for that. Another tax, I know you're a busy man. I have to squeeze all the tax questions I can out of you. I want to get your thoughts on the FIRS. There was an announcement earlier this week that they were going to partner with MATAN, which is the Market Traders Association of Nigeria, to collect tax from the informal sector. You have talked a lot about trying to, formalize the informal sector and trying to get taxes on it. What do you make of this move, this collaboration between the FIRS and MATAN to collect VAT in particular from the informal sector?
Yeah, again, I think it's a good move because it's not a new tax, so which means the tax has always been there, just that the informal sector, including the Market Traders Association of Nigeria, MATAN, mostly haven't been compliant. So what the FIRS is trying to do is to go to them and say, I like the fact that there's even a partnership. This is not, using police to harass them. This is getting them to sign a pact, an MOU to say we want to do it. And because it's voluntary, I really love that. Now, the carrot that the FRS is dangling before the traders is that you guys actually pay a lot of informal taxes. Touts, people, some of them are government agents, some of them are not, extorting a lot of money from these traders on a daily basis. So FRS is saying we're going to use the might and the powers and the instruments of, the federal government to ward off these other guys. So you don't have to pay this 1,500 that you pay every now and then you have to then comply with VAT. I think that overall, if that works out, it will be a win-win for the traders and for the government, because the traders will pay less and government will collect more, right? Now, the other interesting aspect of that conversation, which is about education and awareness, is that in my estimation, more than 90% of these traders will not even have to pay a dime in VAT. Why? Because there's a provision in the law that says if your annual sales, which we call turnover, is less than 25 million, you don't need to charge VAT. And if you sell basic items like food, like medical supplies, educational materials, fertilizers, baby products, you don't need to charge VAT regardless of your threshold of turnover. What does that mean? In my view, I think somewhere around 95 to 98% of these traders will not have to pay any VAT. Now, the 1 or 2% who have to pay VAT would also be entitled to what we call input VAT credits, which means if you are selling a mobile phone, for example, when you bought it, the VAT you pay, you offset it against the VAT you charge when you sell it, and you're effectively only charging VAT on your margin, which in most cases is around 10 to 20%. So effect on the selling price will be around 1 to 2%. So I think this is a good development in my own, from my own perspective.
Okay, my final question, because I know you're pressed for time, and we thank you for taking the time quickly to talk to us. With that in mind, if 97, 98% of the informal sector won't be paying VAT, what is Nigeria's revenue picture for you? Just to conclude, fuel subsidies, you've talked about the need to remove them, so they're gone. Nigeria needs more tax revenues. There's an illustration in Business Day of President Tinubu squeezing a Nigerian and trying to get as much tax on that person as possible, which is supposed to illustrate the tax drive from the government. What's your view on the revenue drive for this government going ahead? I mean, short term and long term.
Yes, good question again. Now, if you take the 40 million, that's the number that the market traders people gave, which is also consistent with the number from NASME, that's the medium small scale associations, MEDAN. If you take that 40 million and you just say 2% of it, 2% of it is 800,000, right? If you get 800,000 people to pay tax, in addition to those who are already paying, that is significant. In many parts of the world, governments will generate more than 60, 70% of their total tax revenue from just 1% or 2% of the tax-paying population. So I think what government needs to focus on is collect the tax from these 1 or 2% of these small businesses, the top of them, then collect data from everyone else and use that data for economic planning. How can we help those micro businesses to become small, the small to become medium, the medium to become large? The more you can grow prosperity for businesses, the more your tax take will look like. But overall, I do think that this government can generate a lot more than we're generating now without introducing new taxes, without increasing the rate of existing one, but just being a little bit more, coordinated and organized in the way we administer and collect the existing taxes.
An optimistic note to end the conversation on. Taiwo Oyedele, partner, fiscal policy and Africa tax leader at PwC. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your insight.